will be tolerated, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So welcome everybody. Again, my name is Kathy Salisbury, and I'm the director of the Ambler Arboretum of Temple University. And today I'm going to talk a bit about gardening for the senses. So let me share my screen here. Share for beginning. Okay, so I can see you all and I can see my screen. This is exciting. Okay, so um, just going to tell you a little bit about the Ambler Arboretum. If you could show me through a thumbs up, how many of you have been to the Ambler Arboretum? So you can give a thumbs up by using, yes, in person. Now I can see your actual thumbs. That's cool. Or you can use the reaction and just put a thumbs up emoji too. Great. So far about half of you, so that's excellent. So have you been in the snow? No? Yes, all right, good. Monica's been in the snow. So we do get some snowshoers and some cross-country skiers there, and it's pretty amazing. There's a lot of snow here right now. I teach woody plant identification for Temple University's Landscape Architecture and Horticulture program, and so we were out today with students trudging through the snow, looking at pine needles, 14 different kinds of pine trees and how to tell them apart. So that was exciting in the snow. So, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Arboretum, and then we'll get onto the senses. So the Ambler Arboretum of Temple University is part of America's Garden Capital, which is what we call it as part of Greater Philadelphia Gardens, which is an organization that's dedicated to promoting the public gardens within a 30-mile radius of Philadelphia. And so there's 36 public gardens within 30 miles of Philadelphia. There's actually more, but there's 36 of us who are members. And the whole point is to get everybody out and exploring the gardens. They have this terrific website, americasgardencapital.org. And I don't know how many of you have seen this passport that they've published, but it's a garden passport. And in there are there's information about the gardens, when they're open, what you can see there, and some information about it. And then in the back, there's a place where you can stamp your passport or write in the secret code. We don't have stamps, we have a secret code. And they're doing a social media campaign that if you go and visit all of them, you're eligible for prizes and things. But it just wanted to let you know there's lots of the gardens are open in the capacity that, with social distancing and masking and all of that. And I encourage you to visit. And of course, we're part of them. And each garden has its own niche and its own story to tell. And it's just really great fun to get out and explore. And of course, you can do that in any time of the year. This is not now. Right now, you cannot see this garden. I think the snow is up to the top of the walls at this point in there. But and I just want to encourage you, those of you who are close by, and to tell your friends who are far away when they come and visit, that the Ambler Arboretum is great to view in any time of the year. So any season. In the winter, you can see the architecture of the spaces, which is great. And then here's spring in the formal gardens. If you were to Google Ambler Arboretum, this is the garden that would probably show up in the Google images. And this is the formal garden. What's now the Ambler Arboretum of Temple University, and the Ambler campus of Temple University began as the Pennsylvania School of Horticulture for Women in 1911. And so these gardens date back more than 100 years. This garden dates back to the 1920s, and we have gardens that go back before then. And so it's a historic space with lots of stories to tell. And so we want you to come and visit in all times of the year. The great thing about this garden is it transitions through the seasons. Whenever you visit, it's new, interesting color combinations. And of course, we hope to be inspiration for you. So we want, since you garden in the area where we garden, we want to show you what you can grow and different combinations you can use and what the deer might not eat as much as other things. You know, so we want you to come and visit and take inspiration from us. Or if you're thinking about a plant, you're wondering what it might look like when it gets older, come and visit us. Maybe we probably have it and can show you. Most of our plants are labeled, or our woody plants at least are labeled. We're working on labeling more of them. So here's summer in the garden. And of course, this is fall in our Calabrero conifer garden. So we have these great collections. Like I said, we want to be a place where homeowners and our community can come and learn from us, not only in our programs, but just by walking around. So we really want you to come and visit. You can find out, we have ongoing speaker series and programs. We're not doing anything in person yet, but you know, hopefully this fall or next spring, we'll be able to again, but we offer free programming. We've transitioned all of our programming to pay what you can programming. So to try and eliminate at least cost as a barrier to participating. So, so you can see what programs we have going on by just visiting arboretum.temple.edu. You can find out there about our membership, about volunteering, and about our programs. So we hope that you'll come and visit. So with that commercial for the Ambler Arboretum done, we're going to get to the point of being together today, and that is to talk about gardening for the senses. So it's a bit of a challenging topic because you can Google gardening for the senses and get an idea and get lists. You can get tons of lists of plants that are good for gardening for the senses. And if I asked you to put in the chat some ideas for plants that you have for gardening for the senses, you could probably come up with some. So why don't you do that? If you want to, just put in some. There's two things. One, put in some plants that you think would great when you think of gardening for the senses. And the other one is, if there's anything you're hoping to get out of this talk that you want to make sure I cover, you can go ahead and put that in the chat too. So just take a moment to do that. And if in case you're wondering, here's the senses, you know, just in case you know, when you try to remember a list of things, sometimes you don't remember all of them, but you can put those in, and I'm just going to keep an eye on the chat and see if there's anything that comes up. Where is my chat? Can't see it. No. No. All right. So, oh, there we go. There's my chat. Move you over here. Okay. So we get lavender. Yes, lamb's ears. All the mint, scented geraniums, right? So herbs, those are great. And that's a go-to, right? For gardening for the senses. People tend to think about herbs to do that. Absolutely. Coral bells, that's an interesting one. Caladium, lilacs, roses, basil, peonies, vinca for color, mahonia, that's a nice one. Lilacs again, too many to name since eyes are the easy run, right? Seeing. And then look for lots of color while keeping deer away, ferns. Excellent, great. So one of the challenges of this gardening for the senses is that gardening is, I mean, it's very much visual. And so that's an easy one to cover, and scent is an easy one to cover usually also. So what I wanted to do is explore plants and explore plants that offered interest in more than one, to more than one sense, so that you're not just one scent or one sense when you go in there into the garden. But we're going to talk about some of those too. And then what I would like you to think about while we're going through this is, can you think of a plant that entertains all five senses? So one plant. This is my holy grail. When I wanted to do this talk, I'm like, can I think of one plant that will occupy all of these five senses? Because that is, I mean, that's really what we want to do, right? So think of that as we go. I thought of one, and you guys might give me the I have a raised eyebrow thing that I do when I'm suspicious of whatever somebody's telling me. So you guys might give me the raised eyebrow thing, but we'll see if you agree or if you can think of one by the time we finish this. So Let's go. So I started thinking about this more and more when I learned this plant, and I didn't know this plant until I started working here at the Arboretum, and I fell in love with it. So this is Salix gracilla styla. This is the cultivar Mount Aso, the Japanese pink pussy willow. And so you might be familiar with pussy willow as a larger tree. It gets the gray fuzzy catkins. And this one, they're just bright pink, and they do this in February. So they're blooming in the winter. And this is their flower. The catkin is their reproductive structure. This is their flower. And what's nice about this is after it blooms this pink, the catkins actually extend. Oh, right. So touch, right? So I have my senses here. So this is what I think they occupy. So we have touch because they're super soft, right? And so that's great. You can't just help but give them a feel as you're walking by. And of course, they're bright pink in February. So that is appealing to the eye and also the heart when you're walking through and they're blooming in the snow. But they also expand. So these are the same catkins. Just about 2 or 3 weeks later, they expand. And I'm sorry, the photo is blurry. I used a different template and everything got expanded. So hopefully there's still not, hopefully it's still appealing, or you can tell what's going on. But as these expand, so they used to be pink, now they turn gray. And then the reproductive structures, the pollens, the stamens, and the pistils, you can see here are yellow and red. And so when you think about gardening for the senses, we also want to think about transitioning what's going to change over the seasons. You might employ a different scent or a different sense over time, right? At one time of the year, it might occupy one sense, and at another time of the year, it might occupy another. So it doesn't have to do all of these at the same time, right? So so I want to think in that way too. One of my favorite trees is a prime example of this, and I will talk about that. And let's see, I have a chat. I don't know where the chat is. All right. Oh, hold on one second. Okay, so here's an example I feel of something that changes through the seasons. Anybody know who this is? You're going to tell me in the chat, and then I can't see the chat. So I will tell you. So these are the leaves, the newly emerged leaves of the beech tree. And look how soft they are on the edges. And so these might be great for touch, for that sense of touch. Also, they're this beautiful chartreuse green with these little light hairs all around the edges. And so, but that fades as the leaf expands. It stops being soft and fuzzy. But at that one particular time of the year, when the buds are just opening and the new leaves are emerging, they're super soft. And so, so that will change throughout time, throughout the seasons. And this is my favorite tree. This is a leaf of my favorite tree. This is Katsura tree, Cercidophyllum japonicum. And has this great heart-shaped leaf with the scalloped edges. The new leaves emerge a bronzy purple in the spring. And it has flowers, but they're not super showy. They're not really anything you're going to write home about, so to speak. But, it gets a nice yellow fall color. But in the fall, when these start to change color, they start to transition to this yellow. The air fills with the scent of, some people describe it as cotton candy. Other people describe it as brown sugar. To me, it's like baking sugar cookies, that smell. And so here, it's not all the time, but sure enough, in the fall, once you know that scent, if you smell it, you know there's a Katsura tree around you somewhere. And the other great thing about this is that nobody knows for sure why this tree does this, why it has this fragrance when it's losing its leaves. It's not attracting insects or anything like that. And I just love scientific mysteries, something you can't Google and get the answer to. I love that. So so it's not all the time of the year, but it can engage another sense. And so we want to think about that. You know, what does it do through the years or through the seasons? And then I feel like there's plants that are really just visual. They're just ones that look nice. And so to me, if you're in my landscape, you have to do more than look nice one time in the year. You have to do something else. And or I have to be able to eat you. If I can eat you, then you get to stay. So clematis to me, as beautiful as they are, I love them. I count the flowers on my vine. The flowers are as big as my face, and I just think they're great. But they're really just visual. They get a cool seed head too when they're done flowering, but that's also visual, right? There's not, I mean, yeah, you could touch it and the petals feel silky, so you could do all of that, but we're looking for something more than that. And so there's plants I put in this 1 cent category. So clematis is one of those. This is a dahlia close up. That's another one. It sure is pretty to look at, right? But they don't really have fragrance. There's not a great texture to them to touch. It's just they're pretty and you want them, but I always say, what else do you do? Bleeding heart, really beautiful. This is the native bleeding heart. This is the fern leaf bleeding heart. So gorgeous flowers. It supports pollinators. You know, it does a lot. But as far as engaging all the senses, doesn't have a fragrance to speak of. It's not some nice weird texture. Can't eat it. So just a 1 cent wonder. Hibiscus, same, not really fragrant, but beautiful, right? So we have these examples. There's tons of examples in our garden. Again, this is a native, big flowers. Pollinators love it. People love it when they see these in the garden. Oh my goodness, you know, you get lots of pictures and they're just stunning, but not really what we're looking for. And then we have this one I call a one-hit wonder too. This is our native euonymus. This is called Hearts of Burston. And so it's a shrub. So it's related to, if you're familiar with burning bush, the invasive shrub that turns bright red in the fall, this is its native cousin. And so it has green stems, yellow color in the fall, but this is its fruit. Sometimes it's called strawberry bush because this resembles a strawberry. And actually, here's what it does. This is how it looks when it sets fruit. It has these little green flowers, and then it opens to reveal these orange seeds inside. So really stunning, but really just eyeballs. There's not really much else going on with this end. The flowers aren't fragrant. I mean, this may be touch because it is weird and spiky. So you might be able to get 2 out of there. But again, visual, but really cool visuals, you know, and they're native. It supports wildlife. So you might want to include it, but it's not a twofer. So of course, lots of people mentioned lilacs in our in the chat initially. And one thing I will say about lilacs and anything that you're considering fragrance is the more old-fashioned it is, the more likely it is to have fragrance. So a lot of plants have been hybridized so much for different characteristics, for double flowers or yellow flowers or whatever it is, that the scent has gone by the wayside. That hasn't been the focus. We find that with roses, very hybridized roses. I mean, you get a bouquet of roses, those big red, you know, dozen roses that people get on Valentine's Day. They hardly have any fragrance at all. They've been hybridized for a large flower head that stays standing upright, that's deep red, but not for its smell. But if you get old-fashioned roses or old-fashioned lilacs, then you'll get lots of fragrance. So not as much with double flowers and hybrids and that kind of thing. But this is certainly 2 senses, right? They're beautiful in the spring and they smell good in the spring. But really, after the spring, what happens with this? They're just green leaves, and then they're just brown sticks, right? So this does occupy 2 senses, but it's 2 senses at the same time, and then really it's done, right? So when we're thinking about gardening for the senses, we're going to think through the seasons. What else do you do, and when do you do it? Do you do everything at the same time? I included this one because some of us have ponds. This is the same thing, fragrant and beautiful, but all at one time, right? In the late spring into early summer. This is our native water lily, great for pollinators, looks beautiful, but it does everything all at once. It smells good and it looks nice in the late spring into summer, and then it's done. So same here. This is Pieris japonica. I like this one because it flowers early. So this is March, April flowering shrub. It is evergreen, but once it's done flowering, the fragrance is gone. There's no fragrance in the leaves. There's nothing really else you're going to do with this. So again, 2 seasons, but all at the same time. So I don't know if you can imagine, I go to the garden center, I talk to the plants and I say, what else do you do? How else are you going to entertain me besides what you're showing me right now in the store? And so I want to know that. And I didn't realize till I started teaching about plants, and I've taught about plants for a long time now, how much I get people to smell things. There's crushing leaves and smelling them. The sense of fragrance is connected to your memory, and so many connections that you make are through smell, that it's important. You can connect to plants that way and even learn how to identify them through knowing their scent. And there's a lot of plants out there that you can get fragrance from at times other than when it's flowering. So that's what we're going to look at too. This is, I'm sorry about this picture. When I was learning how to do presentations a long time ago in grad school, somebody's told me, never apologize for the quality of your pictures, but I just have to. I'm sorry, this one's blurry. But this is of Viburnum ferreri, which is a non-native viburnum, but it's a winter flowering fragrant viburnum. So this blooms in the, well, some of the flowers are out right now, but it's usually later February into March when this is blooming. And it's beautiful pink buds that open up to a pale pink or white flower, and they're very fragrant. The leaves, when the leaf of the leaf, the petiole is what that's called, smells like green peppers. Smells just like green peppers. Now you're not going to walk by and smell green peppers, but if you crunch the leaf up while you're walking by, you will smell that. The new leaves emerge bronze on here. It's a tall viburnum, kind of upright, vase shaped. So again, 2 senses, but pretty much all at the same season. Otherwise, it looks nice. Another one, 2 senses. This one you probably know. This is Fothergilla. So it has great seasonal interest, but it's all about looks. It has great fall color. It's and then it has these wonderful bottle brush shaped flowers in the spring. They smell like honey. I just love the smell of these. I was thinking that also the sense of smell is very personal, right? Like I do not like the smell of hyacinths or those big stargazer lilies. Oh, I don't like them at all. But things that smell like honey or citrusy, that I just love that. So it's all whatever you like. You have to put your nose in it and see if you like it. So smells like honey, and but again, same time of the year, putting everything in there. This has changed names since I learned it. And so I learned it as an anemone pulsatilla, or pasque flower, Pasque. This is a perennial, so it comes back every year. And it likes stony, rocky, it's kind of Mediterranean, well-drained soils. And notice how even the flower petals are super soft on this one. So here we have, it's beautiful and really nice to touch. And this is soft throughout the year. So you can add this softness into your garden along with these beautiful flowers. And these two bloom March into April, late March. They're another early season plant, which is a really nice sign that, spring is on the way and things are warming up. So pasque flower. So again, 2 seasons, but the 2 senses, but it goes through the seasons. And then again, talking about seasonality, right? This is our magnolia. And this is Magnolia salangiana, or saucer magnolia. This is the buds scales. on here. So you can walk through gardens now and see magnolia buds, a lot of magnolias, not all of them, but a lot of magnolias have these buds on them right now, and they're covered with hairs. Some people might even mistake them for pussy willow because they look so soft and fuzzy. But these are the magnolia buds, and they're protected like this because they put these buds on in the summer. And so they need to survive all the weather between the summer and when they bloom in early spring. And so this fuzz helps them, and these scales, these bud scales that you see here, protective outer cover, helps them withstand all of that weather they have to deal with, like all the snow and freezing and icicles dripping on them and everything. That's what they have to do. And so you have these fuzzy buds, this texture of touch at one time of the year. And then of course you have the flowers that emerge in the spring, which is for the visual. And some magnolias are fragrant. Not all of them are fragrant, but some are fragrant too. So you might get 3 senses in there. But again, it depends on the cultivar. So a cultivar, that stands for cultivated variety. And that's basically a hybrid that's been created for some special attribute. So it could be fragrance, it could be the flower color, could be fall color, could be disease resistance. But some plants, when they create cultivars, like I said, the scent is bred out of them, or they haven't paid attention to the scent, where others are very fragrant. So you want to make sure when you're getting something, if you have the option and you want to engage more senses, then pick the one that's fragrant instead of the one that has the double flowers or lots of flowers. I thought this was hilarious when I saw it at the flower show last March, right before the world shut down. This was on display, and they felt like they had to put, I don't know, I guess people thought they should sit on them. But so when we're talking about texture and touch, there's a difference between texture and then actually inviting people in to touch things, right? So you can have all different kinds of textures in your garden, and texture is whether it's coarse or fine, fern leaves versus big banana leaves, those are different textures. And then you have how things feel, and you can demonstrate that or add that into your garden, but you might not necessarily want people to come in and touch everything, right? So that's just a different way to think about your senses. Is, are you trying to get people to engage with the plants, or are you trying to have a look and a feel in a garden that engages the senses without necessarily touching everything? So this is another one that is very cool to look at, adds a whole different texture. It's kind of surprising to see this, but you can see these giant thorns here. I'm pointing at the screen like you can see it. These giant thorns, this is a honey locust thorn. This is probably 6 inches long, this thorn, with all these little thorns coming off it. And it just grows right out of the trunk. It's like medieval, this plant. It grows this way because it was protecting itself from mastodons. And it dates back to that time in our history. And so it developed these giant thorns to protect itself from giant animals. But you're not going to invite people probably to come in and hug this tree, but they do add an interesting texture to your landscape. So there's nothing much more beautiful, in my opinion, than this Oriental poppy. Should have to come up with a new name for that. They're just gorgeous, right? This beautiful color, and it's kind of silky. But the buds too are super fuzzy before they open. So this adds, so it's sight and texture, right? So it's another twofer, and it's different seasons. So, well, a little bit different seasons. So in its bud shape, it has this nice softness. And then when it opens up, it has that extraordinary flower. So again, it's like, what can you do? What else can you do? And sunflowers. So these are annuals that a lot of people include in their garden. Good for pollinators. You can see the honeybee on there. And, like most flowers, silky petals and that kind of thing. Not really much of a fragrance, but if you have the right types of sunflowers, you can eat these, right? So you can harvest the seeds and eat the seeds. So that's a way, and it's a different season than when it's in bloom. So that's a way you can think about having sunflowers. Or if you're not eating them, right, we don't have to eat this stuff. The birds could eat it too. That could count. But I was thinking human senses and human enjoyment when I put this together. But of course, lots of wildlife enjoy these too. So though it's an annual, you can have that beauty and you can eat them. So it's another twofer, but it's it's a different combination of senses than the ones that we've talked about before this. Here's a sedum. This is a mixed sedum. So sedums are succulents. This is a ground cover one. I don't know the cultivar of this, but the color is pretty stunning. And the texture, if you were to touch it, I think I get caught in a trap where I think, oh, I want to engage the senses. What can I do for touch? It's soft. I always go to soft. But here we have waxy, right? And stiff, waxy. And when you think about the different senses in your garden, you can add to the diversity of your garden. You can it'll just be more interesting. It'll be more interesting for you to enjoy it, and it'll be more interesting for the animals who might use it. So there's a whole bunch of reasons to include multiple senses. And so here I thought you can see and you can touch. It has a really unique feel to it too, if you just kind of pat them. Can you imagine me going through a garden and just pat things and smell things and touch things and crunch leaves and that kind of thing? So I don't know if anybody knows who this is. This is Baptisia australis, native perennial, really tough plant. Will grow in all kinds of conditions. It stays upright, doesn't flop, gets about 3 feet around ultimately and about 3 feet tall. Gets covered with these pea-like flowers, like the flowers of a pea plant or a pea vine. This is in the same family. Pollinated by bumblebees who get in there and buzz around. And really stunning in the spring. Great cut flower. Not really much of a fragrance to them though. But sound is a challenge in the garden. Like getting plants that make sound, I think, is one of the more challenging senses to occupy. And in this case, it gets these seed pods. And if you don't cut the flowers off, if you don't deadhead, these seed pods will turn brown, and the seeds inside will rattle in the wind, or you can shake them. And so that adds a nice dimension to the landscape by having that sound in there. And the nice color of seed pods. That's why I think you should leave seed pods in some cases, because they add something to the garden for the senses a lot of times. The lowly petunia. So when I was thinking about gardening for the senses, and I was thinking about annuals that we use in our garden, and so much our choices are dictated by what the flowers do and how they look. And I had to spend my time when I worked at a garden center in high school, pulling old flowers off of petunias, deadheading them so that they would rebloom so we could sell them in their packs. And I will never forget the smell of a petunia. They're fragrant. Their leaves and their flowers have this distinctive scent. And the leaves, you can see the hairs on the leaves here. They're kind of like sticky a little bit and hairy. And so they're just, to me, this is a 3 senses plant. And it's more than just when it's blooming, but they're annual, so they bloom through the whole growing season anyway. So I think they have a distinctive fragrance. They're soft and sticky and kind of weird to the touch. And of course, they're beautiful. So just because I think sometimes we have to think differently about the plants that we're already using, and they do have these interesting attributes that we might overlook just because there's some more interesting flower out there to look at. This is Ludwigia. It's called seed box. It's a native perennial likes wetter areas. Yellow flowers in the axils, so yellow flowers here in the late spring. And then they're followed by these square seed boxes, basically these pods that are box shaped, and the little seeds inside rattle. So sometimes it's called rattle box also. You would need a clump of them for the wind to blow through and you'd hear them. But I think they are interesting to look at. They're beautiful. You can hear the sounds when the pods rattle. Of course, they would make good dried, cut and dried plant also. And then even touching them, because they're square and they feel like a little cube, that's really interesting too. So when I think about the senses and who's going through this, I think about taking, gosh, anybody really, maybe kids or could be adults, and just getting people to engage with these plants. And this is one that's not planted a lot and I think could be planted more. Is so interesting. So that's Ludwigia. And then there's plants that we overlook. People think of these as weeds. I use the example when I used to work for Penn State Extension. In one day, I answered the question about how to get rid of violets in a lawn and then how to grow violets, in other places, because some people consider them a weed. And then to some people, they are a wildflower. These are all native violets that you can find growing around here. So we have a number of different species of violets that are hardy here and native here, and they offer this diversity in flower color. And they are the host plant of the fritillary butterflies. So without violets, we don't have the fritillaries, but also they're fragrant. I've done little miniature arrangements with violets, and you can cut them. They make a great cut flower. They last a while in a vase, a little vase. And they're very fragrant, but also all parts of the violet are edible. So you can candy the violet flowers, you can eat the violet leaves. So here we have, without maybe realizing it, this little tiny wildflower that has all of these senses that are engaged. If you get close enough, I mean, you have to get down on your hands and knees to smell a violet unless you just pick it. But you can eat them. They smell nice, and I think they're beautiful. Some people might disagree. And then this one, this is the downy violet, downy yellow violet. And so this grows native around us. This one in particular, if you can see along the stem here, it has hairs. It has super soft leaves. So you could even add touch into this one for its texture, its soft texture. So that would be four seasons. And because you can eat the leaves, it has this value to the senses beyond one season. And so then there's some other plants that I think we may overlook as good for multiple senses. People sometimes turn their nose up at this plant. They think of it as a weed or a thug or aggressive plant. This is staghorn sumac, Rus typhina. And this is the fruit of the staghorn sumac. So it gets yellow flowers in the spring, and then it's followed by this cluster of fruits. Each one of these is an individual fruit. And this was made into, I mean, the birds like it, wildlife loves it. It's a great plant for wildlife. But Native Americans used to soak this fruit cluster in water to create a lemonade type, citrusy type drink, right? So it has this edible, or you can taste it, and it's delicious. If you haven't, has anybody tried this? It's really good. So I encourage you to try it if you have an opportunity to. But it is staghorn sumac. So here's the stems. The newest twigs on this are super soft. It's called staghorn because it's so velvety. The branches are velvety, like new antlers, right? So you have that nice touch. And then of course, I think it's pretty too. So this is it in a landscape situation growing here, but it has this great fall color also. So, so multiple seasons of interest, but also multiple senses. And probably you all know this one. This is spice bush, Lindera benzoin. And this is a native shrub also. It blooms early in the spring. It's one of the first shrubs to bloom in the spring. And it's quite prevalent in our woods, mostly because it's filled with oils. So the plant has a lot of fragrance, and the deer don't tend to eat it. They stay away from it. They tend to stay away from plants that are fragrant when you crush them, because that means they're high in oils and are not as palatable as other plants are. So spice bush, here's one in a landscape situation again, blooming yellow in the spring. This is what the flowers look like. But these red fruits that you see here are edible. We can eat them, we can dry them and eat them. Some people compare them to like allspice, that spice that you use in baking, allspice. Some people compare it to that, but then some people also compare it to Szechuan, that's a spicy spice when it's dried. But also you can make tea out of the leaves and the stems of this. So there's multiple ways to enjoy this plant. It gets great yellow fall color, yellow flowers, and then those bright red fruits. And of course, all the wildlife it attracts is nice as well. So it's three senses. I'm wondering if any of you have thought about a plant that gets all 5 of them. Elderberry, so the flowers of elderberry, close up. So the flowers are edible. They're beautiful. You can make elderberry flower fritters. There's recipes all over the internet for that. You batter them and fry them up, and you can eat them. So they're beautiful. You can taste them. They smell okay. They're fragrant. Some people like the smell, some people don't. The fruits are super astringent, so you usually have to process them first, but they're edible. So you can make elderberry wine, elderberry jam out of the berries themselves. Side note, my chickens love them. They love to jump up and eat the elderberries. They don't have to process them. They don't mind. So, and then here, this is the shrub itself. This is a cut leaf version with black foliage. So there are different varieties out there, but eating, look beautiful, and smell great. So it's a three sense plant. And again, it's engaging these senses beyond one single season. I feel like I say this is one of my favorite plants about every plant, but this is one of my favorite plants. This is American plum, Prunus americana. So related to cherries and plums, but it's native. It does sucker. So it suckers kind of aggressively where it's happy. So it'll send sprouts up all around. So you have to kind of keep those in check unless you just want a colony of these. But this is its flower in the spring. And this smells like honey. So when it's blooming, it has the most beautiful fragrance, and the whole yard will smell like this. It's a small flowering tree. So if you have the option in your yard and you say, well, I want a flowering cherry, right? A lot of people in the spring, they get inspired to get a flowering cherry tree. And lots of flowering cherries are beautiful. They are covered with flowers, but that's all they do. In the spring, they have these nice flowers. They're not even fragrant. So if you have an option and you want to think about your senses, ask, what else do you do? And then maybe consider something like this American plum instead. So beautiful flowers, fragrant. This is the little one in my backyard with its flowers that my whole backyard just becomes engulfed in this fragrance in the spring. And then you'll notice this little one here, it needs a pollinator. You should have 2 of them. It's not male and female or anything like that, but it gets a better fruit set if you have a pollinator. So plant 2 of them. This was a baby one I brought home to pollinate this one with. But at the end, unlike a lot of our ornamental cherries, you get fruit. So these are the American plums. And so they're delicious, and they are interesting to look at, and you get them after the flowers. So you have this multiple seasons of engaging the senses. So highly recommend that if you're into eating things. You could put pawpaw in this category too. If you're familiar with pawpaws, I don't have a picture of them, but that's a good landscape plant. Great yellow fall color. The leaves look tropical. They're very large leaves. If you crush the leaf, it smells a little bit like diesel fuel or some other petroleum product. It's really weird. Some people like it, some people don't. And but that scent and that oil, whatever that is, keeps the deer from eating that plant. And then you get these pawpaw fruits, and then a great yellow fall color. So you have those multiple seasons of engaging the senses. The flowers don't smell great, but they're really interesting too. They're maroon, 3 petals, smell like rotting meat. You know, so you could have both extremes. You could have your Prunus americana, the American plum, and all of its delightful tastes and smells, and then you can have your pawpaw, which is less than delightful in some ways, but also engaging the senses, right? We don't have, everything doesn't have to be delightful. We want to engage the senses. We don't need to always be comfortable about it or enjoy it. It's everything's an experience, right? We have a stinky plant collection in our greenhouse. so these have these things that flower that just smell awful when they flower, but it's fascinating. I mean, there's a reason why they smell bad. Something enjoys it. Something wants to pollinate it. Grasses are often used. The wind blows through them. So, and you can hear the rustling of grasses. So that is one way to engage hearing also. That is the hardest one, I think, is sound in a plant. So this particular grass is Sporobolus. This is prairie dropseed is the common name of this, Sporobolus. And the reason why I picked this one is because it's pretty to look at. Here you can see it in this is at Scott Arboretum. They use it as a lawn alternative. So this is the Sporobolus here, and they'll go in and they'll cut this back every once in a while. It just sort of seeds in and it's a clumping grass. So when the wind blows through it, of course, it rustles in the wind like most grasses do, so you can engage the hearing. But also, this one, rare for a grass, when this one goes to flower, it smells like coriander. So the whole air gets filled with coriander scent. And so it offers that fourth scent. So this was one that I could think of that engaged all 4 fragrant. All 4 of the 5 senses. So that brings me to the last one, which is the only one I could think of. Oh, you know what? I'm going to ask you, I'm going to see if I can find the chat box. Is there one that you can think of that engages all the 5 senses? You can put it in the chat and I'll see if I can find the chat. Oh, there it is. Oh, let's see. Does the American plum attract deer, the actual fruit? I will say it's not browsed by the deer in my house, and I have a significant deer population like lots of you all do probably. I haven't noticed deer eating the fruit at my house. And I don't think it would attract the deer. I don't think it would draw the deer in if they weren't already there. So you do not need more than 1 elderberry plant to get fruit. But generally with fruiting plants, if you have a couple or a few, the insects can do a better job of pollinating and you get a better fruit set. So if you have 1 elderberry, you'll get fruit. If you have 2 elderberry, you'll get much more fruit per plant, just because of the cross-pollination that's going on. So that's a good thing to try and do. Sumac may give a rash like poison ivy. Is that true? Poison ivy and sumac used to be in the same genus. They used to be clumped together in the same genus. They've now separated them. Any plant can cause somebody contact dermatitis, but it's much more rare in the sumacs, the shrub sumacs, the Rhus, R-H-U-S, than it is with our poison ivy. So I don't want to say it's impossible, but it happens a lot less frequently that somebody has a reaction to staghorn sumac or fragrant sumac or winged sumac than that they do to poison ivy. So I know that people get freaked out about it, but that's I'm reading through the chats. Let's see. I'm sorry I missed this. Lots of color while keeping the deer away. And Katsura, yep, that was the right spelling. Magnolia flowers are delicious when lightly pickled. That is true, that people do pickle the flowers and the leaves, I think, of magnolia. So that is true. That's another sense. You can eat those. So good call on that Dona? Not sure. Yeah. So good call on that. Yes. In fact, I just learned that myself. My students were asking me about it. And I had to look it up and give them an answer. So that's true. I missed a sense. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. The violets are edible. And yes, perennial geranium. Yes, you can eat the flowers of perennial geranium. And they have a nice fall color on the leaves. Don't need more than one elderberry. Flowering plum. Flowering plum it's American plum is what you call it, and it's Prunus americana. So that's where you should be able to find that. Birds do eat the plum fruit. I eat the plum fruit. It's delicious. So if you can beat the birds to it. For the five senses, so we have somebody say lavender. Trying to recall if it produces a sound. I don't know. It doesn't get seed pods that produce a sound. But it definitely is edible, fragrant, beautiful, and it does have that kind of like sticky foliage too. So I'll tell you my one for the five senses. So it is white pine, actually, Pinus strobus. So this is a native plant. Get enormous. We have them all over the campus here, and the reason why I picked it for the five senses is that you can eat the needles. You can make a tea out of the needles, very high in vitamins. It was used a lot by Native Americans medicinally. I think it's high in vitamin C. So you can make a tea out of the needles. So that's at eating it. Of course, you can see it. And the texture and the sound. There is nothing like walking through a place that has a lot of these where it actually muffles the sounds around you. And so I was thinking, you don't have to, maybe you don't always have to make noise to be interesting in the sense of sound. Maybe you're changing the noise around you. And if you've ever had the opportunity to walk through a grove of white pine, this is a path in New Hampshire through a trail through a white pine stand, and your footsteps get muffled. The sounds around you get muffled, where it just becomes quiet and soft. And so I thought, in the senses, what if it wasn't always about making noise, but about changing that? And so, to me, this meets all five of those characteristics. The needles are soft. They're soft to walk on when they're on the ground. We started using needles as mulch here on campus because we have so many white pines. We just rake up the needles and use those as mulch. And it really does change when you walk through them. It just changes the environment around it. So this was the one I could think of that it could engage all five senses through the year. And so with that, yeah, there's all my five senses. With that, I would like to stop sharing and go back to the chat and see if anybody has any other ideas about, I hope this was useful and some interesting way to think about plants. And like I said, you can go online and find all kinds of things, and everybody has such different landscaping situations that it's hard to say plant this and plant this, but maybe this is a different way to think about the plants. So I wonder if anybody else has any ideas for 5 sense plants. It's challenging, right? I think it is. And I was thinking about lots of herbs. There's lots of herbs with fuzzy leaves, and you can eat them and they smell good. So that's probably where another 5 cents plant would be. That is true. Deer do not eat hellebore. They're toxic. So that's definitely true. Yeah. So if anybody can think of any, let me know. Otherwise, I hope that we'll see you in the gardens. We're planning a fragrance garden. Oh yeah, eucalyptus. That would be good. Yep. They don't bother Mahonia either. So we're planning a fragrance garden, and we do try to engage as many senses as possible in our garden. So we hope that you'll come here for inspiration, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. And it's a nice way to spend a snowy Is today just Thursday? It's Thursday, right? You know, looking at pretty pictures of flowers. There are flowers blooming now in the Arboretum. We have witch hazels blooming right now in the Arboretum. So it's great. To me, it's like perfect. Flowers and snow all at the same time. It's just like the best of both worlds to me. The Arboretum is open all the time. So it's open 365 days a year from sunrise to sunset. Right now, we're not doing any in-person programs, but there's no gates. There's no admission. It's open for free. You can come and wander. We do not maintain the gravel pathways in the winter. So just the hard surfaces are maintained, but you can wear your hiking boots or your snowshoes or your cross-country skis and come on in and visit. So we're open all the time. Well, all right. Thank you so much, everybody. It's great to see you. Hopefully I'll see you next month.
Thanks, Kathy.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We do have additional classes scheduled. This, like we told you before, will be recorded and it will be posted on the Upper Dublin Township the Parks and Recreation website, which is upperdublinrec.net. And it will also be on the Upper Dublin Parks and Recreation YouTube channel. Again, thanks, Kathleen, for all of your wonderful tips and beautiful photos. And we'll see everyone soon. Stay safe.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful day.
Thanks, Kathy. Thank you.
Thank you all.